Hello, hello, welcome to Rachel Paints Poorly. My name is Rachel and I paint poorly. But today, art lovers of the world rejoice, for I am not going to be mangling a masterpiece. Instead, I am going to be upcycling a men's coat that I found at Goodwill into a 1950s inspired woman's coat. But first, I'd like to give a shout out. This video was made possible in part by mi linda Titi. Así que gracias, Titi. Este video es para ti. I first had this idea over Christmas, when I saw my sister's winter coat and thought it looked cute, especially when compared to my winter coat that I've been wearing since high school. It's very warm, but just a little bit fashion challenged. I knew I wanted a wool coat, but wool is expensive in both coat and yard form, so it was off to the thrift shop where I was able to snag this bad boy for $33. It is obviously way too big for me, so there was a lot of altering that needed to be done. For inspiration, I found this 1955 fashion plate online at fashionera.com. I liked the wide lapels and the button placement, as well as the front seam lines. The coat in the plate is green, but I decided to go with a darker color to better conceal any worn spots on the material. To access the seams, I first removed the lining and then the collar. When altering garments, a good rule of thumb is to work from the top down, pinning the shoulders first and then going into the side seams. The sleeves will be handled later, so I'm not too concerned about them just yet. I alternated between pinning on myself and pinning on a child-sized display mannequin I acquired a few years ago after it was replaced and slated to be thrown away. Once I was satisfied with the fit, I switched the pins from the exterior of the coat to the interior, either by eyeballing the pins from the front or using a seam gauge, or a combination of both. Then it's just a matter of adjusting the fit until the coat lays properly. Once I'm satisfied, I'll sew the seams. When sewing wool, I like to use silk thread. It's strong while also being smooth and practically melts into the material. Mwah! Chef's kiss. I'm referring to this coat as 1950s-Inspired because in using a modern coat instead of uncut wool yardage, I am limited in how close to accurate I'm able to replicate a 1950s silhouette. It would be difficult, if not downright impossible, to cut a pattern out of the pieces of the original coat. While there wasn't just one all-encompassing 50s style, this fashion plate seems to follow the classic new look introduced by Christian Dior in 1947. My version is decidedly more fitted, the skirt is less full, but this fits into my personal fashion choices in the year of our Lord 2021. I'm not wearing a floofy skirt on the regular, so I don't need my coat to accommodate one. Now it's time for the sleeves. I really don't like sleeves. For some reason, they always give me a bunch of grief. I'm sure it'll be fine this time. Spoiler, it wasn't. I started by taking up the shoulders, then began an attempt to use the existing seams and a dart along the shoulder to take the sleeve in. There was an attempt.
Okay guys, we are now on day 3 and I was hoping that I wouldn't have to reset the sleeves. I could just take it in here, maybe take it a little bit at the seam, maybe take it in a little bit at the shoulder, and I wouldn't have to remove the sleeve and then reset it. But also the dryer is going, so if you hear some weird sounds, that's what that is. But I am having a really hard time getting everything to line up, so I'm afraid that I'm probably going to have to remove the whole sleeve and reset it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So it is 2 days later and I have been procrastinating because this is officially the darkest timeline and I am going to have to completely remove the sleeves and also reshape them using a pattern from a different coat. So no simple alterations. The sleeves are gonna have to be redone, remade. So guess I'll start doing that now.
So I removed the sleeves, splayed them open, and removed the excess width, then trimmed down the top. To set the sleeves, I trimmed the shoulder seams, then decided to remove the additional interfacing from the chest of the coat. It made the coat really boxy and I didn't like the way it looked. To set sleeves, I like to line up the side seam of the body of the garment with the main seam on the sleeve. I pin around the armhole until I reach the gathering stitches. The upper part of the sleeve is usually gathered to allow for movement, and I sew those on the machine using the longest stitch and loosest tension. Then I gather the top of the sleeve until it fits and pin that in place as well, using pins to separate and secure all the little pleats. Know what's the worst part about sleeves? There's 2 of them. Now that my arch nemesis has been defeated, I reattach the collar. This is where it gets interesting. To get the shape of the collar close to the one in the fashion plate, I pin the collar to the lapels and hand sew them in place. To achieve the unbroken line of the collar and lapels, I create a facing out of black silk dupioni fused to a light inner facing, one for each side, joined by a seam in the back of the neck, which I then pinned to the collar and lapels. Because I can't leave welling up alone, I decided to add some piping made from the same black silk as the collar facing. Piping is actually a lot easier to make than it looks. It just takes a little time. All you need is a sturdy length of thin cord placed in the center of your piping material, cut on a 45-degree diagonal. Secure in place with pins, then baste if you like, but I was going to be sewing everything by hand, so I didn't bother. Pin the piping in place with the extra material between the silk facing and the wool collar. There was no way my poor sewing machine was going to be able to handle that much material at once, so I sewed it all together by hand. Despite that, for some reason, I thought the machine would be able to sew buttonholes, but tragically I was mistaken. So I had to sew those by hand too. If you'll remember, the coat was originally made for a man, and men's wear overlaps left over right. I was able to use a buttonhole on the right side put there by the manufacturer to help keep the coat closed, so I only had to sew 2 buttonholes, which was nice, I guess. While using a silk or fur facing on a wool jacket wouldn't be out of place in the 1950s, these funky plastic black buttons with hot pink sparkles probably would. I'm no expert though, so take that with a grain of salt. But they're fun and I enjoyed them, so I sewed them on there anyway. It is, after all, only inspired, and so anything goes. And there you have it, upcycling a men's coat into a 1950s-inspired women's coat. Thank you so much for watching. As always, thumbs up if you liked that video. Let me know what you think, and if you'd like to see more like this in the future down in the comments below. And subscribe if you have yet to do so. Until next time, bye. Ain't that the truth? Unless you're buying wool.